Hello! In this video I'm gonna show you how to implement the multiplayer interaction system in your game. We're gonna go through how to set up Network Manager, create prefab for your player, set up the scene, create items, create interactables, load correct scene and spawn players. I'm gonna use lobby scene to handle loading of the actual game scene. Now let's see how to set up the Network Manager component. Here we need to add all network prefabs lists we want to use in our game. What I do to keep track of all of the network objects is keeping them in 3 separate lists. First list is for world items. A world item is a version of an item that exists in world space. Second list is for inventory items. An inventory item is a version of an item that exists in player's inventory after picking it up. And lastly, there is a list for all other objects. This list includes the player, interactables and focusables. All network objects that you're gonna use must be included in one and only one of those lists. Also, make sure that Enable Scene Management is on. Now let's take a look at the lobby script. Here we have a reference to the Network Manager. Next, there are UI game objects. They display the correct UI. Then there is a reference to network object, which is the player network prefab that we're gonna spawn after the scene is loaded. This network object also needs to be included in one of the network prefabs lists. Lastly, the name of the scene we want to load. Now let's make a new scene and set everything up. Let's start with Input Glyphs Manager. In Assets, Silly Tiger, Multiplayer Interaction System Prefabs folder, there is Input Glyphs Manager prefab. This prefab is responsible for displaying icons for interactions. Let's place it in our scene. You can add and remove actions here. Let's add a new action. I'll call this one Example Action. Now we need to set the glyphs indexes for keyboard and mouse, Xbox controller, PlayStation controller and other controller. So, how do we know what indexes to use? Let's click on Keyboard and Mouse Sprite Asset. Now click on it in the project view, expand Sprite Character Table, and here you have indexes of all icons. Let's do the same for all other controllers. To display the icons, you need to use Input Glyphs Manager getGlyphForAction method. Next, we need to add item registry to the scene. Again, go to Assets, Silly Tiger, Multiplayer Interaction System Prefabs folder and place the item registry prefab in the scene. Item registry is used to dynamically spawn and despawn world and inventory items when they are picked up and dropped. In items list, you need to add all the item infos you're gonna use in your scene. Let's take a look at how to create items so you can use them in your scene. In Assets, Silly Tiger, Multiplayer Interaction System Prefabs Items, there are 4 folders related to items. First, we have Item Infos. Item info is a scriptable object that is a link between world item and inventory item. You can create a new item info by clicking right mouse button in the project view, Create, Silly Tiger, Multiplayer Interaction System, Item Info. I'm gonna make a tutorial flashlight item. Here you need to give your item a name. I'm gonna set it to tutorial flashlight. Now set icon that will be visible in the inventory. Don't display when selected prevents item from being visible when it's selected. You might sometimes find this option useful. For example, if you want an item to be always visible, maybe not in the default position, you can use inventory contains item method and depending on it, display some game object. And now Network World Item Prefab and Network Inventory Item Prefab. These are similar but a little different. Let's start with Network World Item Prefab. We need to create a new prefab, so I place flashlight model in my scene. Now we need to add few components. First, collider, so we can select our item. Next, network object. Make sure to disable auto object parent sync and sync owner transform when parented. The system comes with custom parenting solution. Then add world item base component. Let's assign drop transform. This transform defines the position and rotation of our item when it's dropped. For my flashlight, I'm gonna align the transform so the Z-axis goes along the flashlight model. For the name, set the same name as on the item info. Assign item info that we created earlier, add network transform component, and place the object into world items folder. Now let's create the inventory item prefab. The process is very similar. Place a model in the scene, add network object component, and add inventory item base component. Assign a grab transform. This defines how the item will be displayed when selected. Set inspect distance, which is the distance from the inspect camera when inspecting the item. The smaller the item, the closer to the camera it should be. Default name should be same as the name on item info. Is usable means that an item can be used, like a flashlight can be turned on. Is inspectable means that an item can be inspected. If you don't want your item to be displayed when selected, set display item when selected to false. Now we're gonna add some functionality to our flashlight. To do so, let's create a new script. We want to enable and disable the flashlight, so we're gonna need a reference to a light and also audio source to play switch audio. Now let's create onFlashlightUsed method. This one will be called on all clients when the flashlight is used. We can also add interaction context as a parameter to this method. For items that can be in multiple states, like a flashlight can be on or off, we need to somehow keep track of the state and synchronize it on all clients. I'm gonna create a network variable of type bool here. It's gonna keep track of the state of our flashlight. Only a server can change the value of this variable, and when the value is changed, there is a callback invoked on all clients with the old and the new value. Let's create onNetworkSpawn method and call base onNetworkSpawn so we have all the default behavior still in place. And now we can do flashlight on value changed plus equals flashlight state changed. Next, we need to create the method flashlight state changed. This method will update the flashlight for all clients. If you want to create an item with more than just two states, instead of using bool, you can use int, where each number is a different state. In the onFlashlightUsed method, only on server, update the flashlight on value. In the flashlight state changed method, let's add some logic to enable and disable light and play audio. We need to do one more important thing. In the onNetworkSpawn method, we need to synchronize the flashlight state so late joining clients have the item synchronized. Let's create light under the flashlight, position it and assign reference in our script. Also, add audio source component, assign audio clip and assign the audio source in our script. Let's get back to inventory item base and add onFlashlightUsed method to onUse event. Drag and drop the new object into inventory items folder. Now that our world and inventory prefabs are ready, let's assign them in the item info. To place the items in your scene, there are 3 ways of doing that. You can place world item in the scene. You can make a script that spawns the item in the scene using network manager, spawn manager, instantiate and spawn method. You can add an item to player's inventory using inventory add item method. It's important to note that if there is no valid slot in inventory, the item will not be added and the function will return null. Now let's move to interactables. I want to make a door, so I'm gonna place this door model in the scene. Add network object component and interactable base component. Now we need to create script to handle opening and closing the door. The process will be similar to what we did with items. We're gonna need 2 audio sources, one for opening and one for closing. We also need transform, which will be the moving part of our door. Now let's add network variable door open of type bool to keep track of the state of our door. Create onNetworkSpawn method and add door open onValueChanged plus equals door open changed. Create door open changed method and add the logic for opening and closing door on all clients. In the onInteracted method, change door open value. You can also use door interactable setActionName method. Back in the inspector, assign onInteracted method to onInteracted event. Drag and drop the new object into interactables folder. Now you can either place the prefab in a scene or use network manager, spawn manager, instantiate and spawn method to place the door in your scene. For focusables, you just need to add network object component and focusable base component. Then create a CineMachine camera, set priority to some higher value and assign it to focusable camera. Set the default action name, which is the text that will be displayed when a player looks at the focusable. Allow multiple interactions allows multiple users to use one focusable at the same time. If you want to create more complex focusables, you can use onInteraction and onStopInteraction events to enable some specific behavior. You can take a look at the Padlock script to see how to implement this. Let's rename the focusable and place it in Focusables folder. I forgot to add Collider to the painting, so let's add it now and apply changes to the prefab. Lastly, there are readables. Just add a readable base component on any object you want. It can be world object, inventory item, interactable, focusable, or just a collider. Now we need to set up our player. To do so, you need to do the following steps. Add network object component to your player prefab. Add network transform component and set the authority mode to owner. Instead of just using camera for your player, you need to be using Cinemachine camera. So add the Cinemachine camera in place of your normal camera, and to your normal camera add Cinemachine brain component. Here I also place the camera under the Cinemachine camera. Add interactor prefab to your player game object. Again, I place it under the Cinemachine camera. We need to set up the interactor now. First, remove the network object component from the interactor, since we already have network object component on our player. Assign reference for interaction transform. This should be your Cinemachine camera. For item inspect camera, we need to create one more Cinemachine camera. Set its priority to a value higher than your player camera. And then assign the camera to item inspect camera. This camera will be enabled when you start inspecting an item. In the inventory component, you need to assign item drop transform. This is where an item will be placed when it's dropped. So create a new transform. This time I'm not placing it under Cinemachine camera because I don't want it to be affected by camera rotation. And assign the reference in the inspector. Everything should be working now, but let's take a look at some other properties of the interaction and inventory components. First, we have some events. The first event, onInteraction, is invoked every time an interaction involving this interactor occurs. For example, when an item is picked up or when a door is open. You can use provided interaction context to get details for this interaction. The next two events are only invoked on the client that enters or exits some interaction. These are when player starts or ends reading a note, inspecting item, or interacting with a focusable. These are useful to prevent player movement when they enter any of those states. Then we have inputs for input system and legacy input manager. Remember that if you change anything there, you also need to update input glyphs manager icons. Canvas reference is used to disable the UI for all clients who are not owners of this interactable. Default reticle and interaction reticle are used to indicate if players can interact with something. You can change sprites for those if you want to. Inspect sensitivity is the sensitivity when inspecting an item. Reading UI is enabled when interacting with a readable. Reading text displays the text of a readable. Next, we have TMP text references. These are used to display text and icons for interactions. Interaction layer mask is used when raycasting from camera. Interaction distance is max distance of the ray. Rotation mode is used when displaying selected item. For inventory, we also have some events. OnItem pickup is invoked on all clients when a new item is added to the inventory. OnItem drop is invoked when an item is removed from inventory. OnSelection changed is invoked when a selected item changes. Next, we have inventory slots list. Each inventory slot also have allowed items and disallowed items lists. If lists are empty, they are ignored. If not empty, then the lists define what items can and cannot be stored in a specific slot. Then there are references to UI. Item icon will display icon of an item. Selection indicator will display selection indicator. You can add more inventory slots. Just add UI for new slot and assign references in the inspector. Item select audio source plays a sound when a selection changes. Item display transform is where an item is displayed when selected. Depending on your camera FOV, you might need to adjust the position and rotation of this transform. One more thing we need to do in this scene is to add spawn positions component to spawn the player. This component is used to spawn players after loading the scene. Also, remove all game objects we don't need. Let's open lobby scene and set up the lobby component. Change scene name and assign the player prefab we created. We need to add the player prefab to network objects list. Also, I'm gonna rename it to tutorial first person character controller. Now we need to add the scene we made to the scene list in build profiles. You can get the system on the Unity Asset Store, and if you have any questions you can join Silly Tiger Discord server. Links are in the description down below. See ya!